What is a fascist? That word's getting thrown around a little bit lately, and the good folks on the left are particularly prone to redefining whatever words they want whenever it suits their agenda. But a bit of intellectual honesty and history may help us be less gullible when they do. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines fascism as 1. A political philosophy, movement or regime that exalts nation or race above the individual, and that stands for a centralised autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opinion. And 2, a tendency toward or actual exercise of strong autocratic or dictatorial control. It might also help to define autocratic. An autocrat is a person ruling with unlimited authority or one who has undisputed influence or power. In case it's not obvious, these things are bad for a society that values its freedoms and liberties. Not imaginary rights, which actually require an imposition on everybody else, but real freedoms, like the very fundamental freedom of speech. A thriving democracy also celebrates things like freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of association, and freedom of the press and media. When you see people suffocating these freedoms by various methods such as laws and bullying, you need to recognise that's bad for society, because who wants to live without freedom? Now, freedom isn't all a bed of roses. Freedom for you and I also means freedom for people who hate us and our values, and freedom for really, really bad ideas to be expressed without restraint. I believe the only limitation should be the actual incitement to physical violence. Anything less than this, total freedom of speech, risks an arbitrary line of limitation moving further and further away from real freedom. And that is indeed what we now have. Australia's most widely read and presumably popular commentator, Andrew Bolt, was charged with and found guilty of the crime of hurting people's feelings under Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. His transgression was to offer commentary on the not uncommon occurrence of people preferring to identify with a small fraction of their ancestry rather than the majority of their ethnic heritage. This isn't remarkable. It's a common sentiment many people wonder about and some even complain about. This was certainly public interest. And again, 18C has been wielded as a weapon against a group of university students who were expelled from a computer lab on the basis that they weren't the right race. They were told it was a, quote, black space, end quote. Callum Thwaites complained on Facebook that QUT was stopping segregation with segregation. Another student, Jackson Powell, asked sarcastically, also on Facebook, where the white supremacist computer lab was. The staffer then sued them for $250,000 under 18C and wanted them found guilty of racial hatred, a charge eventually defeated in court, but not before a secret investigation, an expensive legal defence, public humiliation and defamation. The final outcome may have been just, but the 3-year legal process was the punishment. Catholic Archbishop of Hobart Julian Porteous was hauled before the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Tribunal because the church sent Catholic teaching about the Bible's view on marriage to Catholic parishioners and Catholic school parents. How scandalous! The church teaching what the church believes? The real scandal, of course, is that the legal system is so easily manipulated by radical social agendas that it can so seriously jeopardise the fundamental freedom of religion we cherish in every Western democracy, and rightly so. Brutal communist dictatorships have historically sought to snuff out religion completely because the greatest threat to fascism is independent thinking, deriving one's beliefs and values not from the state. And that's why we must never let the school system replace the primary place of parents in instilling values, because that just creates fertile ground for fascist agendas such as the evil Safe Schools program. But that's next week's subject. Weaponised by the left and used as a blunt cudgel to beat society into submission. Instead of winning at the ballot box, it's the left's ultimate insult to democracy because it subverts the legislative process with an activist judiciary and creates arbitrarily protected or persecuted classes of people instead of equality. as any selective restriction of freedom inevitably will do. Yes, people are going to say silly, hurtful, and even hateful things. But truth cannot be compromised for the sake of feelings in law. When we start having to pretend things aren't exactly what they obviously are to avoid offence, we have exchanged reality for fantasy. Real problems cannot be solved in a fantasy world. They can only be wished away. Playing make-believe is not a solution. The only way to face reality and solve problems is to not restrict the robust contest of ideas, public debate and independent thinking. Everyone must be invited to participate. No one must be excluded. Every idea must be submitted to the test of public scrutiny so we can truly be confident that the best ideas have won after having been submitted to rigorous tests of evidence, justice and logic. Now remember what fascism really is: social regimentation, forcible suppression of opinion, and a tendency toward or actual exercise of strong autocratic or dictatorial control. Let's fight for freedom and against fascism. This is Church and State with Dave Pellowe.